Welcome. As you come into the Zoom room, we welcome you and we welcome everyone on Facebook Live. We hope that you will share this event with your communities. This is a very exciting conversation to start a Friday morning with on the impacts of climate change on coffee. So we're really happy that you're here. And we have some really exciting guests. We have a couple of videos to show, and we also have some live music. So hopefully you have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or a glass of water, whatever your morning beverage is, and you can sit back, relax, and enjoy our hour together. So my name is Susanna Tuttle. I am the director of the Eco Justice Connection program at the North Carolina Council of Churches, of which North Carolina Interfaith Power Light is one of our primary campaigns as we work to address climate change as a moral imperative. We welcome all of you this morning and very, very excited to learn who's here. So if you can use the chat feature and dropping your name, your location, the community that you identify with, and also we like to begin by acknowledging the land that we find ourselves on. We recognize that we live on occupied land in the United States, and here in North Carolina, I find myself on the occupied land of the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation. Most folks know that as Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So if you do know what indigenous land you find yourself on this morning and would like to share that as well, please do in the chat. And if you don't, this is an opportunity to learn more about our relationship to the environment and to the people and places that we love. So with that, thanks for letting us know who you are, where you're at. And for those of you on Facebook Live, we look forward to connecting with you there as well. So going forward, I'm going to pass it over to Ryan Bailey, who's going to open us up with this song this morning. Take it away, Ryan.
Thanks, Susanna. My name is Ryan. I'm with the River Breaks. And this is actually an important topic for me. I did the Peace Corps in Costa Rica and worked with some coffee farmers. And even now, they've been impacted by increased floods and storms and hurricanes recently. So this is an important topic to me personally. So this song is called Where My Heart Lives. I've been up on the mountain and onto the ridge, and I can't find the place where my heart is. Love has always been like jumping the tracks. You get high as hell right before you crack. Ooh. Ooh. So indecision flows like it goes through my veins. I'm always flying the sails when the winds first change. Came out of the night in my room. It's like stepping off a boat and on a dry land. Ooh. Ooh. Will I always love you, or can our love fade? Can the heart stay alive once it has been tamed? Will you look with me when I get restless? Will you sew me back down when I get reckless? Ooh. 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 Will you slow me back down when I get reckless? When I get reckless. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you so much. So welcome, everyone. We've had some new folks join the Zoom room. Again, if you'd like to share your name and your location into the chat, then we can get to know each other as we go through the program this morning. So it is with great privilege and honor that I am here today, Susanna Tuttle, Director of North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light, along with my friends and colleagues from North Carolina League of Conservation Voters and Environment North Carolina. You're going to hear from each of those organizations as we move through the program. But with no further ado, the opportunity to share a video from Congresswoman Kathy Manning is my pleasure. And just briefly, Representative Kathy Manning is an American lawyer and politician from the state of North Carolina. Of course, she is the United States representative from our 6th congressional district. And many of you know who are on the call today that the district is located in the heart of the Piedmont Triad and includes Greensboro and Winston-Salem. So we'd be curious if Representative Manning is your representative in Congress. Share that in the chat too. That would be interesting to see how many of her constituents have joined us this morning. Representative Manning wished that she could be here live, but as we know, as for all of us that are following what's moving in Congress, she has a lot going on, both with her committee work and what's happening in the House with different bills that are moving very, very quickly. So instead, she was able to record a welcome video for us. So Rachel, if you can share that, let's welcome Kathy as she welcomes us this morning. Representative Manning.
Hello, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Kathy Manning. I'm representing and working hard for North Carolina's 6th congressional district and all North Carolinians here in Congress. Thank you for joining today's event. Thank you for being involved and for working towards solving the climate crisis. President Joe Biden has called the climate crisis one of the 3 great challenges we face right now, along with the pandemic and rebuilding our economy. What I've seen since getting to Washington is that many of my colleagues recognize, as I do, that we must work together to address climate change and bring about the clean energy economy we know we need. When we do that, we will make our communities healthier, support frontline workers, and begin to heal our planet. I look forward to working with North Carolinians like you, the amazing advocacy groups that put this event together, and my colleagues in Congress to act on climate. Thank you all for joining today.
And thank you, Congresswoman Manning. We are so grateful that you were able to deliver that message to us today. And we are working very hard, again, through the Climate Action Campaign, amongst all of our different organizations, to support the members of Congress as we act on climate and work to support President Joe Biden's Build Back Better plan that we're going to hear more about in his public speech next week. So more to come there. Again, if you are a constituent of Representative Manning, it would be great to send her a tweet, a Facebook message, or a handwritten note or email and thank her for joining us this morning. So now it is, again, my great privilege and honor to introduce our senior climate scientist who's going to be giving us a big picture overview of climate impacts on coffee. Brenda Ekwurzel is the senior climate scientist and director of climate science at the Union of Concerned Scientists. And we are very, very, very pleased that she's able to join us on this Zoom call. Brenda, as I mentioned, in her role as Climate and Energy Program at the Union of Concerned Scientists, ensures that program analysis reflect robust and relevant climate science and researches for influence of major carbon producers on rising global average temperatures and sea level. Dr. Ekwurzel is a co-author of the 4th National Climate Assessment, NCA4, Volume 2, and she presents frequently to a range of audiences on climate science, educating the public on practical, achievable solutions for climate change. So, Brenda, thank you again for being with us this morning, and take it away.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity. And so what I wanted to do was join you in the cup of joe, right? I really can't get my start in the day without having my favorite cup of coffee, usually 2 cups before I start getting on the screen. So really quick, I know you all probably know some of these facts about coffee and climate change. So I just wanted to refresh our memories on what the implications are. And can you see my slides? I just wanted, okay, thank you. So this is actually a study that was published this year about coffee grown on Mount Kilimanjaro. And they were really looking at the people who are growing this coffee in Mount Kilimanjaro. And they said the biggest risk for their crop was extremely wet conditions and extremely dry conditions. These really affect the flowering stage, the development stage, and the harvest stage. So you don't have to worry about all these different details. I'm sure that we can dig in at other times during this discussion today, but I just want to look at that extremely dry and extremely wet. The main thing to remember is this. Unfortunately, with climate change, there is a connection between extreme weather and climate change. And there's really strong evidence of when you have really extremely wet conditions and when you have extremely dry conditions. There's a really good reason for this, mainly that the atmosphere can hold more water vapor. So when you have very hot conditions, your vegetation is going to lose more of its water through transpiration into the atmosphere. The soils are going to lose more of their soil moisture, and as well as other bodies of water. Now, when that water is in the atmosphere, and if you happen to be in a place where it rains at certain times of the year, it's more likely to have more water vapor coalescing to be available for an extreme event. And some of these extremes are pretty intense. And so that very concern of the farmers who are looking at coffee, they don't like when it's extremely wet and they don't like when it's extremely dry. So unfortunately, we have to figure out ways to help this type of crop. There's one other risk that is really important. As we all know, climate change is happening. And one of the indicators is that global average surface temperature is increasing. And we just finished the hottest day on record since record keeping for global average temperature in the 1880s. So that is an unfortunate fact. But the goal is to try to keep it from not getting too much warmer, not really taking off in an exponential way. So luckily, we in the United States have rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement, and we will be telling the world, what are we going to do in North Carolina? What are we going to do as a country to contribute to reducing emissions to stay within the Paris Agreement? So why do we care so much about trying to stay within the Paris Agreement? And I'll bring it back to coffee with this Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change series of statistics that looked at 1.5 degrees. So if we warm to another 1.5 degrees, the unfortunate fact is that the species will lose over half of their climatically determined geographic range at this level of warming. It's still pretty manageable, but it's still some loss. And so we have to figure out how to deal with it. So insects would lose almost 10% of their range. Plants such as coffee can lose around 8% of their range. And vertebrates could lose about 4% of their range. And to give the idea of why every half a degree Celsius of warming really matters, look at these percentages and how they change with the upper guardrail of the Paris Agreement, which is 2 degrees Celsius. These numbers nearly double. So the insects that would lose half of their geographically determined range would jump from 10% up to 18%. You're approaching almost double. Plants like coffee, 8% doubling to 16%. Vertebrates doubling 4% to 8% of their range. But this is something that is closer to the world we know today. We currently are on higher trajectories. We have not yet gone on the Paris Agreement level of trajectory in terms of emissions. So we have to dig deeper to hold it to the Paris Agreement. And remember, every half a degree really matters if you love drinking coffee. So for example, you may hear about how people who are buying coffee, production from farm, bringing it to your local favorite coffee shop, they're looking at this zone A here, and I'm showing Mount Kilimanjaro from hemp in 2006, looking at the coffee and banana plantations in this lower montane zone. And you can imagine as it's warming, you have to start moving up slope, but you also start just shrinking the area that you can grow, because as you get higher up the mountain, there's less and less area for anything to grow. So this is something worldwide. Mount Kilimanjaro is just one example. Coffee likes to be on these slope locations. And so you'll hear more about that, but I just wanted to let you know that that finding from the IPCC really matters as places such as coffee growing in Mount Kilimanjaro. And we can do better tackling our climate crisis at home and abroad, combining environmental justice, science, equitable access to jobs, fair pay, international engagement. We have to do it all in order to make sure that coffee is a sustainable crop. And it can be part of the solution. We can have much more carbon sequestered in the soils while we're growing coffee. So I'll hand it back to you, and thank you so very much for this opportunity to be with you today.
Thank you, Brenda. Wow, that was a lot of information that you were able to encapsulate. Thank you for those slides. And we are recording this, so we will send this to everyone who's joined us on Zoom. And again, it is on Facebook Live. So if you're watching there, you can contact us if you'd like to get a copy of Brenda's slides. That was really helpful. And Brenda, I hope you can stay on. We're going to show a video of a local coffee roaster, Counterculture Coffee, interviewed by Drew Ball, the executive director of Environment North Carolina. And afterwards, I'd love to open up the discussion so that we can answer any questions that come in the chat for you, Brenda, and to hear your response to the video of a local coffee roaster. So Rachel, if you can share the video, thanks.
Sounds good.
Hey folks, I'm Drew Ball. I'm the director of Environment North Carolina. And Environment North Carolina is focused on protecting our planet, our air, our water, our open spaces, and we work to protect the places we love. We advance the environmental values that we all share, and we win real results for our environment. And today I am so excited to be speaking with Brian Duggan, who's with Counterculture Coffee based out of Durham. Brian manages Counterculture's B Corporation certification relationships and has been working on sustainability with them for years now. And word on the street is that he's a darn good soccer player too. So Brian, thanks for joining us.
No, thanks for the kind words. Glad to be here.
So, for folks who are watching this and don't already know, can you tell us a little bit about what Counterculture Coffee is all about?
Yeah. So Counterculture, we are a specialty coffee roaster, and we are based out of Durham, North Carolina. We've been in business for almost 26 years now and have always had a focus around good coffee, conversations around the environment, and sustainability. So that has kind of formed itself in a few different versions over the years, but we really were founded on the idea of buying coffee from bird-friendly areas that helped reinforce bird habitats. And out of that, we kind of grew into more of a, sustainability as a whole for coffee. And really what Counterculture is most known for right now is price transparency and transparency around how we buy coffee throughout the world. So specialty coffee I mentioned earlier, we're kind of the top tier of coffee quality that we purchase and look for. And that is a little different, but very like in the same conversation around commodity coffee. So what you hear like on the sea change, the stock exchange market and everything, specialty coffee is a section of what coffee is sold throughout the world, and it's always in the highest of tiers of quality.
That's great. Well, I know that climate change is a major issue for a number of businesses, but especially for the coffee industry.
Right.
So can you talk to us a little bit specifically about how climate change is affecting your business and really more broadly the entire coffee industry?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question that I think we've been talking about and focusing on for over 10 years now. And at its simplest, when you think about coffee grows in tropical climates, and it grows on the side of mountains, and it has, just like any kind of agricultural crop, it has a very good zone of temperature, climate, moisture, terroir, everything that kind of plays into like what makes the best kind of coffee. And so if you think about coffee literally growing on mountains, as that temperature rises, the area of where we grow that coffee and where we look for that coffee is also rising. So it works really well when the temperature drops significantly at night. So warm days, cooler nights, as the climate, as the whole environment where coffee is growing, as that is changing, that area is moving up and also shrinking because the mountains don't continue going up with it. So one, we're really running out of room for where that coffee can grow. And on top of that, we're having more people drinking coffee. So the specialty market has grown exponentially over the last 10 years. And so it's kind of a combination of less supply and a lot more demand. And so it's been challenging. You can't really separate counterculture from the industry because it is the exact same thing that's happening to everyone in the coffee world. So it's been very top of mind for everyone. So yeah.
Well, so just like it does to animal habitats, forcing them to migrate to different areas, coffee is the same story, and that's, I'm sure, having a huge impact on the farmers that you work with and all those types of folks along that chain.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we know that addressing climate change is going to take citizens, government, businesses like yours being engaged and changing our practices, changing our business models. Can you talk specifically about what Counterculture is doing to act on climate and be a more sustainable company?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things I would highlight. Over the last 5 years, we were conducting what we were calling climate change workshops at Origin, and our sustainability team at the time was trying to raise awareness at the level around what climate change was and how it was going to impact our crops. So we had, I can't remember the exact numbers around it, but we had workshops over the last 5 years that were on the ground talking to people. That was essential for us to just continuing to help our producers be able to produce in different climates. And an awareness campaign it's a long-term project. It goes on for a while, and hopefully the benefits of that we get to see over the next 5 to 10 years. But step one for us really was, let's talk about it. Let's raise that awareness. Another big thing that, where I've come into this mix is working with B Corp and becoming B Corp certified was a part of doing that, raising awareness, but on a much bigger scale. Counterculture has been known for sustainability over the last 25 years, but what we really wanted to do is to continue leveraging what we've done a pretty good job at, which is talk about buying coffee, working with other companies that are doing that in similar disciplines, and trying to raise awareness, combine our efforts towards creating better policies and practices to help address climate change. So I think there's our biggest impact as a company is going to be our purchasing and what we're doing with the coffee that we buy. So we focus on that every day. And as we continue with our producers around the world, and then longer term, and really the focus the last 12 months since we've been certified has been combining those efforts with other companies and leveraging B Corp for that. So a lot in the works with it. B Corp has some really cool projects and initiatives that talk about climate specifically. So yeah, we feel pretty lucky to be a part of that.
That's great. Well, we appreciate all the work that Counterculture has been doing to be a sustainable company. And I know that I've been enjoying Counterculture coffee for years, and hopefully climate change will make it so that we can keep enjoying Counterculture in our cup every morning for a long time. And Counterculture has really been a staple of Durham and really actually North Carolina for a long time. It's been incredible to see y'all pop up in more places up and down the East Coast over the years. It seems like y'all have been doing a great job of sticking to your sustainable roots. If folks are curious about the work that y'all are doing around climate change and sustainability, or generally what the coffee industry is doing on that front, what resources would you point our viewers to?
Yeah, the coolest thing that we do is our transparency report. And we were early on in the specialty coffee world, we wanted to talk about how we were buying coffee and how we interacted with our farmers. And so our website has a lot of resources around kind of that process and where we started and kind of where we're at now. But we have put out a transparency report every year that goes really in detail around purchasing principles, on the ground initiatives that we do with farmers, talking about our annual seeds fund, which redirects money that we receive from selling certain products to farm initiatives across the world. And we roll that out usually in the fall for the previous year's reporting. And that's probably the coolest thing that Counterculture has done and continue to do and continue to evolve. So I think we have 12 reports on our website that you can access. And there's a lot of cool stuff in there to really see how coffee has evolved in that time frame, and how we as a company have tried to just be a part of that dialogue around what does buying coffee look like as an American company buying coffee from everywhere around the world, and how can we continue to talk about that in ways that drives change for people that are making that product. So that's probably the coolest thing I would plug you to, is to look at the most recent transparency report and go real deep on coffee knowledge.
Awesome. Well, bringing it back to National Joe Day, the hook of why we're here, I got to ask you one more question. As a renowned caffeine coffee expert, when you walk into a coffee shop, what do you order?
That's bold. I'm so excited to be walking into coffee shops again over the last couple of months, and I mean every time I'll get a black coffee. That's usually my go-to. But if I'm going out for coffee, I want a cappuccino. Always very good.
Awesome. Well, Brian Duggan with Counterculture Coffee, thank you so much for joining us for our National Joe Day event, our Climate Coffee House. Thanks for taking the time, and cheers.
Yeah. Thanks, Drew. It's good to see you.
All right, y'all. Back to regularly scheduled programming. Thanks.
Oh my gosh, that was great. And thanks to Drew and to Brian. And Brian, thank you so much for dropping in your sustainability reports link into the chat. Really fantastic. As many folks said, the ability to provide that transparency for your company should be required, right? That should be what we are offered through corporate sustainability and corporate accountability. And so thank you for leading the way on that. And we're really grateful that you're able to be here. And if folks have questions for Brian, we can bring Brian into the discussion since he's online, we can bring him into the discussion point of this Q&A. And I want to bring Brenda back up on the screen so that we can hear from Brenda, our climate scientists, first and foremost, to the response to the video, and an opportunity for Brian and Brenda to maybe have a conversation too. So Rachel, maybe if you can pop Brian on the screen, if Brian's willing. I'm just like throwing him up there, but we're in a coffee house. We want to be able to see each other. So yeah, Brenda, what? Go for it. And then we do have some questions in the chat, so I'll get those ready, geared up for you.
Sure. I think, Brian is a leader in the coffee counterculture, basically looking at those supply chains, paying attention to climate change, all the things that could disrupt the coffee business. And so that is really important, is looking for those businesses that are paying attention to this, are looking to invest in adapting, and also being part of the solution, which is really important, because basically every time we emit carbon dioxide or methane into the atmosphere, and it's in the form of carbon that circulates around, if carbon dioxide, a lot of it goes into the ocean, but a lot of it goes into coffee and terrestrial soil that coffee is grown in, as well as the terrestrial biosphere. And then the rest remains in the atmosphere. So the terrestrial biosphere is an active part of the carbon cycle. And so how it's produced and grown is a very important part of the solution to climate change. Secondly, we do have an advantage in the United States. We live in one of the largest emitting nations. And so what we do here at home can help the coffee being grown around the world. If it's an exponential emissions curve, it's much harder to adapt to coffee growing. But if it's within the realm of the Paris Agreement, we all, ironically, not only supporting counterculture, but we're supporting the new EPA Secretary Regan and some of the your local organizations that are advocating for, like Environment North Carolina, advocating for how do we do this here at home in our own institutions, Interfaith Power Light. Faith, there's calculations. There's a UN report that was just released. I had the opportunity to edit, and looking at just the carbon footprint of all the institutions, faith institutions around the world, it's actually quite large. So institutions can do their part to reduce their own emissions, be role models, also be sanctuaries whenever there is an extreme event. To help. A lot of these places are situated on higher ground, refuges. You need both community support during an extreme event, as well as knowledge infrastructure. So in North Carolina, we can improve and ask our leaders and the federal government to say, if there's a hurricane on the shores of North Carolina and people are fleeing, we need to have information right on their phones, which routes are better so you don't go up. This literally happened during a hurricane that hit North Carolina, where a person was fleeing, parked at a friend, and their car was washed out with the intense precipitation that hurricane brought on land. So we need better science and supporting right there in your phone while you're making individual decisions. We can do better as a country.
Thank you so much. I love that you are connecting the big pictures of climate impacts and the climate risks that we face. In North Carolina, we have a climate risk and assessment of our entire state, and especially those coastal regions. Our organization currently is working in partnerships with other faith-based initiatives and scientists to look at building community resilience hubs through our congregational network. And how I love that this connects back to the coffee conversation, because as Brian, you were speaking, one of the things that I thought about is I've been in churches all across the state, all across the country, churches, synagogues, temples. And one of the things that is part of our fellowship, of course, is coffee hour. That's and what it would look like if we transition to sustainable fair trade coffee in all of these places. So Brian, I feel like I have an added charge now to make sure that Counterculture coffee is the coffee that is in every Durham congregation in our network, and then as well partnering with other local roasters across the state, and thinking that as we're having that sip of coffee and we're acting on climate in a domestic way, how we're impacting within international solidarity of the people and places of other countries, but also the crops and the animals, as you said, and the migration of the ecosystem, and how we can impact that by having that cup of coffee. And I'm going to jump over to a question here, Brenda, and Brian, you're welcome to answer as well, from Sarah Ogletree, that's wondering about her own role in this and how she can make the most difference. What are some ways for consumers to support coffee growers and people in the business of ethical coffee? Large scale and small scale climate actions that are particularly impactful. What would those better policies and practices look like?
Sure. First and foremost is understanding the story of the coffee that you purchase. And Brian is an example of sharing his story and how he's been working and with his team and the whole Counterculture company, as well as many other coffee roasters that are at the leading edge of climate resilience, climate smart business. And joining with others, they're sharing best practices, sharing understanding. I'll give you one example why business has to pay attention to in a way that you might not realize this. In the National Climate Assessment, I was lucky enough to be an author of one chapter, but I was paying attention to another cross-sectional chapter. Do you know about this computer screen we're on right now and the CPU in our phone, in our laptops, maybe an iPad or some sort of other device? There are companies that are supplying major chips, and for this. There was a major extreme event that disrupted the chip supply for many months. And it was a part of the world that was supplying a lot of the Apple devices, PCs, of other major corporations. And the price of our products went up, but we didn't realize that that was a climate price hike. It's just hidden. But the businesses know that they had so much of a supply chain. They're thinking, where is that business? Is it on a floodplain? Thinking about the full circle impacts of risk of my disrupted chip supplier is something that affects all of us, yet we don't see it. So climate change is like a drag. It's like a negative GDP on our efforts around the world. And so the more we tell those stories, the more we understand how businesses actually can be more nimble than governments and really move and leave. And they can move capital and they can move people and jobs. Because so many working on climate change solutions, that's a lot of jobs.
Brian, do you want to share anything in response to that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot to add. I love where you started that thought. And I think thinking about knowing the story of any of the products that you're buying is pretty key to it. And I think one of the big things that we, as a company, we really focused on becoming B Corp certified and really looking at leveraging that community. But I think of myself as a consumer a lot, and I try to find products when I'm out there that are doing more than just selling a product. And B Corp helps me make that an easy thing of looking for the logo and the certification. But I think, raising awareness around the companies that are trying to have that conversation and trying to make change is really important. And so having those buying habits, around companies that are doing that is great.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for the education. We definitely, in relationship to B Corp, I know there's a lot of education that needs to be done. And so how we can, as we say in the faith community, evangelize this good work and spread it far and wide. We have another question for Brenda from Enrique Sanchez. Can you focus and elaborate more on the impact of climate change on coffee producer countries in Central America, Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and the ancillary relationships with migratory flows with people coming here? Another example of how all things are related.
Yes, thank you, Enrique. That's a very important question. So what I think of most is the tropical regions are not only good for growing coffee and other amazing variety of biodiversity, they also are dealing with one of the climate change disasters that are getting more severe are hurricanes, tropical cyclones, typhoons. And the way I like to think about it in a metaphor is the sun is always hitting the tropics. It's almost an equal day and night where its location is, and it's hot. But we've lost a lot of our air conditioner at the polar regions, especially in the Arctic. It's the fastest warming place. It's 2 to 3 times more warming up in the Arctic than it is in the global average. So that means that during the summer, one of the ways you distribute that heat and you get it to the polar regions is you need a difference between the heat of the tropics and the cold of, say, the Arctic region in the northern hemisphere, hurricanes and tropical cyclones that happen. So the Earth is sweating more, longer. The ocean temperatures are hotter. So unfortunately, the Mesoamerica growing region is an area where there have been devastating, I mean, literally life-altering, ruining livelihoods of many, many people in Honduras. I mean, we're talking massive scale. And so when people are waiting for recovery, trying to recover, and they find that their livelihood is still not there, they are more likely to flee and move. And so a lot of the core reasons are not just governments and other things, it's the stressors on those historical decisions of resilience, investing in communities, investing in livelihoods, disrupting corruption or other things that are going on. You get hit by these hurricanes and they're more severe. That stressor of climate change can really be a threat multiplier for human dimensions of decisions we've made that might have survived the last century of climate, but we haven't designed our human systems, our geopolitical systems, or our infrastructure, which includes knowledge, and as well as hardened infrastructure, to be designed for the 21st century. We're still powering our energy with 20th century, even 1800s, 19th century technology. So we have to shed some of the old and bring in more of the new and keep some of the old that really works.
Wow, that is heavy. And so critical. There's some really great comments in the chat that I just want to give a shout out to. If we're gathering to talk about and encourage the work of justice, we need to incorporate that justice into every aspect of our lives. Grateful for the conversation regarding justice for migrants. Thank you, Sarah, for those comments. Dustin says the economics of climate is going to be the thing that convinces people who aren't with us now that they are already affected and need to act to save their way of life. And connecting this with that cup of coffee, with that cup of Joe in the name of this event. Tomorrow is National Joe Day. Who knew that existed? But now that we have a Joe in our president's, in the office of our president, we wanted to honor National Joe Day. And so tomorrow, when you have your cup of Joe, do a cheers to the Build Back Fossil Free plan that we hope he is designing. Build Back Better means build back fossil free from our perspective. And we know that as we come up on the Earth Climate Week of Earth Day and the Global Climate Summit, and the release of our nationally determined contributions of what we actually are going to put into the Paris Agreement now that we're back in. We advocate very strongly for a fair share NDC and to think about what the U.S. fair share is. And the U.S. Climate Action Network, of which our organizations are members of on a national scale, has determined that it is our fair share to reduce our emissions domestically here in the United States to 70% at 2005 levels by 2030. That's a huge target that we have to meet in order to stay to 1.5 degrees. And we have an additional global responsibility of 125% because we are the largest emitter. We are also the richest country. And we have that global responsibility. We can do this. We know that we can. So if you think about our fair share being 195% at an international scale, we've got to build back fossil free. And I think connecting that dots and then what that means for our cup of coffee, just make it really practical as we're educating, inspiring, and mobilizing our communities and citizens. So we're gonna, I'm gonna kick it over to Ryan to play, Ryan to play another song, and then Dustin Ingalls from North Carolina League of Conservation Voters is going to give us a call to action. But before we do that, I want to give Brian, you and Brenda some last words that you want to share, anything that you don't want us to miss or absolutely want us to do.
I just think I'm actually quite hopeful because we are moving as a country. And I have even more hope in the states such as North Carolina, because locally you can do so much. There's so much potential for being a leader and showing how the federal government could move even faster. I love setting goals and I like beating them. And as we say in the international game, we're trying to have a race to zero. And the U.S. should darn well win that race. We have a fair share if we win and we exceed our goals.
Yeah, thanks for having us and thinking about counterculture during this conversation. And I, the only thing I would remind everyone is that you can make big change from your day-to-day habits, and looking at what you're buying and how you're buying it, how you're using it. Will make long-term changes to the issues that we're talking about. So continue to think responsibly about that and continue to look for companies that share your same values. So thank you for thinking of us in that and glad to be here today.
Thank you both so much. And yes, we are the ones we're waiting for, right? We can do this, and together we will win. I do believe we will win. Thank you for connecting the global to the local. We're so grateful you both were here and can join us. Let's stay in touch. Thanks to everybody who asked questions and made comments, and to all of you out there watching on Facebook Live. We're going to kick it back over to Ryan for a song, and then we'll hear our call to action. So get ready. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, great. I'm Ryan with River Breaks. This has been a fascinating conversation, so I really appreciate that. This song is called Sky Gazer. I was wild once till you rescued me. Hunting for survival took a toll on me. I was leaning weather like a persimmon tree. Skin like an alligator, grew dead around me. I was a sky gazer, moon chaser. Ooh, your love's gonna change my mind, distort my time, yeah. You were sweet like honey. I was lucky to find strong like a long pull of moonshine, standing in the prairie, purple at dusk, face full of wonder, planets above us. You're a sky gazer, moon chaser.
Ooh, your love is gonna change my mind, restore my time. That's your power. That's your power. Uh-huh. Ooh, 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 ooh. Restore my time, yeah. Ooh, 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 ooh. Restore my time, yeah. Ooh, 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 ooh. Restore my time. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dustin Ingalls. I'm the Director of Strategic Communications at the North Carolina League of Conservation Voters. At NCLCV, we're all about creating the political environment that'll protect our natural environment and our people. And I really appreciate our speakers and all of you making the connection between climate change and people, because really what it is all about is people's lives, people's way of life. The people who grow our coffee, the people who drink our coffee. And at events like this, I always think, well, I've learned a lot. I've enjoyed the songs. I've enjoyed talking about these things. I know a lot about these issues, but now what do we do with this information? How do we act on it? So as Susanna mentioned, there's a big infrastructure package as part of President Biden's Build Back Better plan that is being prepared in Congress and in the Biden administration right now. That'll be unveiled in a matter of weeks. And a lot of groups like us are really pushing to have as much investment in clean energy as possible so that we can tackle climate change and build back better, not only from COVID-19 and the economic crisis that caused, particularly for low-income communities that were already impacted by pollution and being of low wealth already and being more exposed to COVID-19, not only recovering from those crises, but then creating a long-term sustainable economy that benefits those communities particularly. So we're pushing for about $2 trillion in spending in this infrastructure package that will really tackle climate change and climate justice. Again, particularly for those low-income communities that are most impacted. So what you can do is urge your member of Congress to push for as much of this investment as possible. And our national organization, the League of Conservation Voters, has a petition that you can sign that I'm going to drop into the chat. And it will connect you directly to your member of Congress, whether it's Kathy Manning or Greg Murphy or David Price or whoever it is, or if you're listening from another state, whoever your member of Congress is there. And you can customize the letter that you send, the email that you send to your member. Tell them what you learned today and how coffees and people who grow coffee are impacted by climate change. You know, members of Congress certainly need a lot of coffee to get their job done, so they probably would appreciate hearing the difference that'll make on their lives. But the personal story is very important. So there's a sample letter you can send there. You can just fill in your information and click send. It's very easy, or you can customize it and tell them whatever story you want. But that's what you can do, but continue to share with your friends what you learned today and the importance of acting on climate. Share that petition and let's get this done.
Thank you so much. And that link is in the chat there that Dustin dropped. And as I said in the chat, Brian, I want to order Counterculture coffee to send to our senators with a note and tell this story. I know we're gonna put this recording on YouTube. So tweeting at our senators and our congresspeople this video would be a really great way to advocate for our values and to make sure that people are thinking about where their coffee comes from and the impacts on the entire world. We can make changes with policy, but we, as Brian said, can make changes every single moment of every single day. And I've actually had a lot of conversations with members of our network across the state that in the same way that we promote energy efficiency, so many of our coffee makers have all these like little computers in them and such. And so after you brew your morning pot of coffee and you sit back to enjoy it, unplugging that coffee machine is actually a kind of act of worship. I mean, it really is. So every single moment of every single day can be this beautiful way of saying, I love you. I love the world. I love the people and places in it. And step by step forward together, we can be the change that we wish to see. So again, as we round up this day, if everybody who's on the screen, we can go into full view. I'm going to go into gallery view so I can see all of you. And if you want to come off of camera and lift up your coffee cup, and maybe somebody can take a screenshot of of all of us having our cup of joe and saying hello. We support President Biden and his Build Back Better plan. We want it to be a Build Back Fossil-Free plan that addresses our commitment to the communities that we serve, as well as live in international solidarity. And I'm grateful for all of the things that bring us joy, especially this cup of joe. So have a great day, everyone. And thank you again from North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light, North Carolina League of Conservation Voters, and Environment North Carolina. Thanks to our speakers and Brenda Ekwurzel. Thank you so much for bringing your brilliant climate science and for all the work that you do. We will continue to follow Union of Concerned Scientists as you help lead the way for following the science. So cheers! Have a great day, everyone.